Hello, and welcome to Beatles to a T instructional guitar video. Hi, I'm Rob Taylor, and I'll be your host throughout the course of this video. We'll take an in-depth look into the guitar playing styles of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. I'll be discussing various playing techniques such as finger-picking patterns, string muting, detunings, as well as some historical background of the songs. And in some of the songs, you'll get to feast your eyes and ears on up to 3 guitar parts being played simultaneously. Yes, sir, oh, madam, you get it all here on Beatles to a T, where I've made a personal commitment to accuracy, which is essentially the bottom line when learning these songs. Most of the songs that you'll witness in this video won't be shown in their entirety, primarily to avoid any unnecessary repetition. The good news, however, is that every element of each song will be covered in the condensed renditions presented in this video. Before we begin, I'll briefly discuss these Beatle guitars that I have here with me. These guitars here are just a small sample of the plethora of guitars the Beatles used throughout their reign at Abbey Road Studios. I feel that these guitars in particular are the most essential ones concerning the sound as well as that classic Beatles look. What we have first on the far left is the Gretsch Country Classic II, which is a fine reissue of the 1962 Gretsch Country Gentleman. It was this guitar that America watched George play when the Beatles first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Next is the 3/4 scale Rickenbacker 325, the famous John Lennon guitar that he used on the Ed Sullivan Show and stuck with pretty much up until the Beatles quit touring in 1966, which just happens to be the year that John, Paul, and George each received an Epiphone Casino, which this one is a reissue of. Originally, the Casinos had a tobacco sunburst finish on them, and what John ended up doing a couple years later was removing the finish on his by sanding it down to the natural wood. You can see him playing the sanded guitar atop the apple roof in the film Let It Be. In this reissue, Epiphone emulated the sanded look with the natural wood finish. And over here we have the remarkable looking and sounding vintage 1964 reissue Rickenbacker 360 12-string electric. This guitar was featured heavily on the Hard Day's Night album and can be seen strapped onto George numerous times in the film as well. Incidentally, the guitar that George had then and still owns to this day was only the second 12-string ever produced by Rickenbacker. This guitar also grabbed the attention of American group The Byrds once they caught a glimpse of the Beatles using it in A Hard Day's Night, and the guitar contributed in large part to their distinct sound. And finally, last but most definitely not least, one of my personal favorites, the Gibson J160E, a very unique sounding acoustic guitar that has the option of being amplified if you so desire. You'll see how it sounds plugged in later on in the video. John and George both own one of these beauties, but it was John who showcased it much more frequently in Beatles recordings. As a matter of fact, every time you see the J160E in this video, it's a part that John played. And of course, there are some specific technical differences in these more current models from the originals. But as far as I'm concerned, they're all still high-quality guitars and do a fine job in emulating the authentic Beatle guitar tones. And if you really want to try to capture authentic tones, I would suggest you plug into one of these babies. And no, not this little baby, it's only here for grins. I'm talking about one of these big ones. This is a Vox AC30, which was pretty much the Beatles' primary choice amp. Again, there are certain technical differences from the original 60s models, but I've found in emulating the Beatles sound with most small combo tube amps, or in this case with the Vox in particular, I plug into the Brilliant channel, then simply adjust the Brilliant knob to the desired level of volume, crank the treble to about 3/4, then turn the bass down almost completely. These settings should allow your guitar to nicely cut through in a live mix. So this is just some of the gear that will be featured in this video. Let us begin where the Beatles' recording career began, with their first #1 hit, Please Please Me. When the Beatles recorded this song, John played the famous intro on harmonica while George doubled the melody line on guitar. When it came to playing the song live, however, John didn't play harmonica at all throughout the song, leaving George to provide this melody line solely on guitar. As you see, the riff starts here and is played octave style. That's where 2 notes 1 octave apart are struck simultaneously. And now here's the verse sequence. We'll take a look at the song now. This next one is the song the Beatles opened the Ed Sullivan Show with on their first appearance back on February 9th, 1964. The song, All My Loving. They worked the live version just a little bit differently than the studio version. In the studio version, there appears to only be one guitar playing up until the lead comes around. Then you can distinctly hear two guitars being played. When they played it live, instead of playing the same rhythm that John played, George sort of picked along the same chord progression that John played, but in somewhat of an offbeat upstroke fashion. As you'll see here, some of the finger positionings of the chords between the two guitars are different, but of course remain in the same key. Before we roll that, though, we'll take a look at the lead played slowly. Please note how the pick and the ring finger each strike a string, but in parts of this lead, though, the ring finger rakes over multiple strings instead of just one, so please watch and listen for this. This next song, incidentally, just happened to be song number 2 the Beatles performed on The Ed Sullivan Show. It was a cover song that became part of the Beatles' repertoire early on in their days of playing the riotous red light district clubs of Hamburg, Germany. The song was originally featured in a 1961 musical entitled The Music Man. The song is Till There Was You. The Beatles version is a far cry from its original. They really made the song their very own, and possibly with the help of their brilliant producer George Martin, they came up with some really tasty guitar pieces for the song too. I chose to play the John part on the Gibson J160E because that's what he used in the studio for this song. And for the George part, I chose the Gretsch, which is the guitar he used to perform the song live. What you'll see here is the song in its full length, due in large part to its ever-changing rhythmic arrangement, but also because it gave me the opportunity to show variations of some of the other ways George Harrison played this part, such as when he played it live, where he often tended to add some pretty cool fills that don't exist in the studio version. So, ladies and gentlemen, Till There Was You. The song you'll be learning next bears a close relationship to Till There Was You, partly because it's another slow number that features, again, a solo vocal performance by Paul McCartney, but also because it uses the same instrumentation as the studio version of Till There Was You, with John on his J160E and George playing a nylon string guitar, which fittingly offers the song a nice touch of class. I chose to play the George part with a felt pick, as I also did on numerous other songs in this video, which I'll mention when they come along. We'll begin by taking a look at the intro riff slowly. Next, the verse sequence. And now the lead. Now, I don't know this to be fact that the Beatles used felt picks, but when I listened to the recording of And I Love Her, the attack on the strings sound warm, unlike what a plastic pick would sound like. Yet the felt picks do provide enough attack and tend to release from the strings in a much softer manner. So let's see what you think, right here and right now. This next song features 3 guitars, one of which hasn't been used yet, the 12-string Rickenbacker. It only has 2 small parts in the song, though, the intro and the equally short outro. The chords that are played on the 12-string require only the first 4 strings, or in this case, being a 12-string, the first 8 strings. And one thing to make sure of when playing this part is to allow the open high E string to ring out every time you strike a chord. This next song, I must say, is one of my favorites. It's got all the essential ingredients that make up a timeless classic. A very hooky riff, fantastic melody, and sweet three-part harmonies in certain areas of the song. And it's also said that it was the first time feedback was ever purposely recorded, not to mention put to constructive use. The feedback was used to open the song. You guessed it, I Feel Fine. It's easy to believe that the feedback was produced by plugging the J160E into a Vox amp, but did you know that John also played the rest of the song on that guitar too? For years, I always thought he used his Rickenbacker 325 on that recording. Come to find out, he used the acoustic plugged in. I'll first explain to you how to get this feedback. I suggest that you use light strings to do this because they feedback easier than heavy strings. If you have a split channel amp, use the clean channel. And with both knobs on the guitar turned to the max, just turn the master up until you hear a deep humming sound start to creep in. It is this humming sound that hones in on a string and makes the string ultimately vibrate, giving off that unique feedback. Now, depending on the location of the guitar in relation to the amp, sometimes it will hone in on the wrong string. I've found that it hones in on the low E, the A, and the D string. The one you want it to hone in on is the A string, or the fifth string. You don't need to hold the guitar up to the amp to do this. I'm generally about 3 to 4 feet from my amp when that A string kicks in. Once you find the right location, what I do to better control the feedback is mute all of the strings up towards the headstock, then just nub the A string, then release your muting finger to allow the string to vibrate. And voila, there you have it. Now we'll take a look at how to play the main riff of this song. This is another song in which I chose to use a felt pick on the acoustic, for the same reason as before, softer, warmer tone. This riff is pretty much played straight out of a bar chord. The strumming pattern, as you'll see here, is... This next song came to Paul in a dream. When he woke up, he made his way over to the piano and began figuring out the chords for this melody he had in his head. He gave the song a working title of Scrambled Eggs. As the song developed over to guitar, the foundation was set. He opened the song with a G chord, but when it came time to record the song, however, he tuned his entire guitar down one whole step. In doing this, he changed the key of the song from G to F, though he still played the G chord fingering on the fretboard. This led many people to believe he opened the song with an F chord, and under that assumption, they proceeded to inaccurately fumble through the rest of the tune and ended up with completely different chords throughout the song than what Paul actually played. Most tablature I've seen on the song opens with an F chord. The song also features an interesting playing style by Paul, in which he uses only his thumb and index finger, a style in which he has inventively utilized over the years and still uses in his music to this day. Before we begin, you'll need to tune your guitar to this tuning. The next three songs that you'll see come off what is commonly referred to as the Beatles' acoustic album, Rubber Soul. This album played a key part in bridging the early Beatles stuff to the more psychedelic studio Beatles. They started bringing on different instruments and looking for different sounds as well. This next song, for instance, was the first Beatles tune to include an exotic Indian instrument called a sitar, which had been brought into the mix by George Harrison. To play this song correctly, you'll need a capo on the second fret of your guitar. And for those of you who aren't familiar with a capo, it's a device that fits onto the neck of the guitar and is used to raise the pitch of the strings. For best results, as you're shown here, you always want the capo to sit closer to the upper half of the fret than the lower half. John originally wrote the main riff of this song around an ordinary D chord, but possibly to better suit his vocals for the song when he recorded it, he popped a capo on the second fret. And though he still played the song the same, the capo made the song's key change from D into E. Capos and alternate tunings are common pitfalls that lead one into learning songs incorrectly and should be considered when something just doesn't sound right that you've learned. Now here's a slow look at the Norwegian Wood riff, followed by the song. What we have next for you is another capo song. This time it needs to be placed at the 5th fret. I also used a capo on the 5th fret for the lead of this song too, mainly because it's easier to play with a capo, and I'd venture to guess that they also used one for the lead, but I've also seen it played without one too, so you can make the call on that one. I again used a felt pick on the lead only, and I also set the tone switch on the guitar to a warmer setting. The two acoustics in the beginning are essentially playing the same line despite subtle picking differences. So here's song number 2 from Rubber Soul. This third and final song I've chosen off the Rubber Soul album again employs a capo, this time way up on the 8th fret. Another musically misinterpreted song due to the involvement of a capo. As you'll see, the capoed J160E provides the rhythm for the song, while an uncapoed double-tracked acoustic 12-string provides some very whimsical, almost Renaissance-sounding melodic phrases, which were played entirely on only the first 2 strings, which are the strings that are in unison to each other on a 12-string, as opposed to the others that are separated 1 octave apart. So here you have it, go! This next song contains possibly the most catchy guitar riff in the history of rock and roll. Many aspiring guitarists place it among their first of challenges ever to master. I know I did. The riff comes from Day Tripper. Here's the main riff slowly. Shown here are the individual notes in the key of E for the rhythm. And the rhythm strumming pattern. And the lead. Notice that during the lead segment, one of the guitars plays an ascending scale in which every note of the scale swells in volume and is quickly turned back down before the next note is hit. As you'll see, this is done by using the guitar's volume knob, and this, of course, could also be done by using a volume pedal. So get ready to witness Day Tripper. The song coming up next is And Your Bird Can Sing. This song was penned by John, who plays rhythm with a capo on the 2nd fret. And if you listen to the version of this song on Anthology 2, you'll see that it was originally played in the key of D. That was until he decided to capo the 2nd fret, which changed it to the key of E. The rather tricky, harmonizing lead guitars were splendidly arranged and played by Paul and George. There are 5 segments that involve these dueling guitars. These are the intro riff, the short riff that's sandwiched between the 1st and 2nd verses, the middle 8 or bridge riff, the longer lead riff, and the outro riff. Right now, you'll see the 2 guitars playing the riffs in that order I just mentioned, but slowly. And from there, we'll just float straight into the 3-guitar real-time version.
Here's the intro riff. The 2nd riff. The middle 8 riff. The long lead riff. The outro riff.
Now, if you'd really like to take on a challenge, try to figure out both of those lead parts on one guitar. I think it's physically impossible to play both parts to a T on one guitar. However, it can be done sufficiently enough in a live situation. We'll move along now with a song that again features that unique McCartney thumb and index finger playing pattern. This time it'll be just a little bit different though. We'll be using the 4th chord of Blackbird to examine this picking pattern, primarily because that's where this type of playing first occurs in the song. Let's take a look at the picking pattern now, slowly. An erratic picking pattern such as this can prove to be disastrous if you don't properly mute the unwanted strings. This holds true in many other songs as well. We'll take another look at that fourth chord, and I'll explain to you what strings are being muted. As you can see, the only strings that are actually being held down are these two, which are the second string at the 12th fret and the 5th string at the 10th fret. The high E string is muted by the small finger on the second string. The second string, as I mentioned, is being held down at the 12th fret. The third string is to be left to ring open. The fourth string is muted by the index finger, while the fifth string, again, is being held down at the 10th fret. And finally, the sixth string is muted by the thumb over the top. Let's take a look at the song now. This next one is another capo tune, this time back to the second fret again. This song features a fingerpicking technique that appears in several other Beatles songs and was also incorporated into one of John's solo songs too. It was during one of the Beatles' visits to India in 1967 that John's friend Donovan, who also happened to be visiting, showed John this particular method of playing. John took off with it and immediately used it in a few of the songs that ultimately appeared on the White Album. The song we'll work on now was a tribute song from John to his mother Julia. We'll use the first chord of this song to observe this fingerpicking method. When playing this, you need to maintain a steady, constant bass line with your thumb, as shown here. Then, to complete the phrase, pick the first, second, and third strings accordingly with your middle and index fingers. And from there, it's just a matter of knowing what chords to play, which I'll show right now. Notice how the thumb comes over the top and is utilized in some of the chords, including this first one. We'll carry on now with a song that uses the same finger-picking pattern as Julia, but without a capo. This is the only song on this video that features the Epiphone Casino. It's also the song with the most layered number of guitar parts, with 4. Which is precisely why I chose to use this octave pedal to emulate the lead guitars, which were double-tracked 1 octave apart and only appear throughout the last verse of the song. Before we begin this tune, you'll need to drop the low E string down to D. Though the Beatles rarely did this, it's quite a common thing that's done by many other artists. So here's a look at Dear Prudence. This next song will be the final song to appear in this video, and appropriately so since it appeared on the last track of the last Beatles album they ever recorded, Abbey Road. I found the song to be one of the tougher ones to figure out. It's another classic example of Paul's fingerpicking, which in this song features a nice little bass line throughout that is conquered by the thumb alone. Pay close attention to the fret hand thumb, not only partaking in bits of the bass line, but also muting certain strings over the top of the neck. And since the original song only clocked in at 23 seconds, we'll run through the entire song twice, once played slowly, then a real-time version. And so we exit this video with Her Majesty. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Rob Taylor and look forward to seeing you again in future instructional guitar videos. Thanks for watching.
riff.